Welcome back to my channel Knowledge Chronicle.
What if I told you the most surprising ecosystem on Earth is something you interact with multiple times a day? Forget the Amazon rainforest. We're diving into a hidden world teeming with life right beneath your nose. Prepare to have your perception of cleanliness and even life itself completely redefined. You won't believe what's living on your toilet seat. Seriously, it's not just germs. This is an entire complex ecosystem adapted to an everyday surface. In the next few minutes, we'll zoom into that tiny universe, meet the micro-inhabitants, follow the great migration that moves them around, and separate the real risks from the myths. By the end, you'll see why this quiet surface matters more than you think. Welcome back to Knowledge Chronicle. Today we're stepping into a tiny frontier that's surprisingly big on science. Let's go. When we say toilet seat microbes, we mean all microscopic life. Bacteria, fungi, tiny viruses, and even single-celled eukaryotes that can live on the plastic, porcelain, and metal that make up modern toilets. Together, these organisms form a microbial community, a group of interacting organisms that share a habitat. All right, let's go over some quick definitions. First up, microbe. This refers to any microscopic organism, like bacteria, fungi, viruses, or protozoa. Basically, you can't see them without a microscope. Next, microbiota. This is the collection of microbes living in a specific environment. For example, your gut microbiota or your skin microbiota. And finally, microbiome. Sometimes this term is used for the microbes plus their genetic material and the environment they interact with. So, here's something interesting. A toilet seat actually has its own microbiota. It's like a tiny neighborhood of microbes, each with its own rules, neighbors, and unique lifestyles. Now, let's meet the residents. They fall into broad groups. Skin bacteria commensals, like Staphylococcus, epidermidis, and other coagulase-negative staphylococci, are actually quite common. Commensal means, basically, that they normally live on us without causing any harm. These bacteria are well adapted to our dry, salty skin. For example, there's a bacterium that helps keep your skin's pH balanced. Most of these microbes are harmless, and some are even helpful. Gut-associated bacteria, such as Escherichia coli or E. coli and other Enterobacteriaceae, are another group we often encounter. E. coli is actually a large family, and many of its strains are harmless residents in our intestines. Only a few strains are known to cause severe disease. So, when these bacteria show up on a toilet seat, it usually just means there are traces of fecal matter, not necessarily a sign of a dangerous infection. Environmental bacteria are species that are commonly found in soil and water, including Pseudomonas or Bacillus species. These microbes are pretty resilient. They can survive wet and dry cycles, and sometimes they even form noticeable colonies. Fungi, like Candida species or, common mold spores. Fungi are actually a completely different kingdom of life. Yeasts like Candida can live on our skin and mucous membranes, and they might cause infections sometimes, especially if your immunity is low. Viruses. They're tiny and often pretty transient. They need living cells to replicate, and usually they survive on surfaces only briefly, though honestly, the exact survival time really depends on the virus and the conditions. Biofilm communities. These are microbes embedded in a protective slime they produce, called a biofilm. Basically, a biofilm is a structured community of microbes that are encased in a self-made matrix. Think of it, like a slimy apartment complex where cells share resources and protect each other from disinfectants. Some examples you probably know are dental plaque, the slippery film you find in pipes, or even on rocks in a stream. And here's an important note. Many of these are just ordinary, non-harmful residents. The ecosystem on a toilet seat isn't some hospital ward of deadly monsters. It's actually a complex balance of life, shaped by things like touch, moisture, and nutrients. The Great Migration, how microbes arrive and leave. So, how do these microbes get there in the first place? Well, there are several ways. One of the most common methods is direct contact, like touch. Our skin, you see, is constantly shedding cells and microbes. Every time you sit, stand, or even rest your hand, you're seeding the surface with them. Let's consider an example. Imagine you use the toilet after walking barefoot in a garden. In that case, you might deposit some environmental bacteria on the seat. Now, let's talk about fecal contamination. Tiny amounts of fecal material can land on surfaces during use. This can seed gut microbes such as E. coli. But don't worry too much, as this is typically low-level and localized. Flushing can launch microscopic droplets and particles into the air. This is called aerosolization, the process of converting liquid into tiny droplets that suspend in air. Those droplets can settle on the seat, the floor, or even toothbrushes left nearby. For example, if you flush with the lid open, you can send invisible droplets into the air. The critical idea here is, it's not magic. It's physics and fluid dynamics at work. Fomites and cross-contamination are important concepts to understand. Objects that touch the seat, clothes, or phones can carry microbes to and from the surface. A fomite is any inanimate object that can transfer microbes. Think, doorknobs, phone screens, or towels. Air currents and humidity, play a big role in shaping which microbes thrive in a bathroom. Bathrooms with poor ventilation and high humidity actually support different microbes than the ones you'd find in dry, well-ventilated spaces. Moisture in particular really helps microbes survive and even grow. So the toilet seat is kind of like a crossroads. Microbes arrive by touch, by spray, or even on objects, and then leave when the surface is cleaned, dries out, or when a new microbe outcompetes them. Microbial life strategies. Let's talk about some of their survival tricks. Why can microbes persist here? Well, there are a few strategies they use. So desiccation resistance is pretty interesting. Some bacteria, can survive dry conditions much better than others. These hardy microbes are actually favored on seats that manage to dry out between uses. Now let's talk about biofilm formation. Microbes are able to form biofilms, especially on rougher surfaces. This makes them a lot harder to remove than you'd expect. And then there's spore formation. Certain genera, like Bacillus, can form spores. That's a sort of dormant, really tough state that helps them survive even the harshest conditions. Alright, let's dive into the fascinating world of quorum sensing. You see, microbes have this incredible ability to communicate chemically to coordinate their behavior, like building biofilms. It's like they have their own little language. Quorum sensing essentially means they count their neighbors through these chemical signals and spring into action once a certain threshold is reached. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now imagine this, folks. Microbes as tiny city dwellers. It's a fun way to think about it. Some of these little guys bring umbrellas, which are like spores, while others build apartment buildings with locks, which we know as biofilms. And then there are those who call up their friends to work together, just like quorum sensing. It's like a bustling little city down there. Alright, let's talk about the implications beyond the gross-out factor. We're talking risks versus benefits here. It's time to move from EW to AHA. So what do these microbes really mean for us? Let's explore that, shall we? So, health risks are real, but, they're usually pretty low. For most healthy people, toilet seat microbes rarely cause infections. Most of these microbes are actually skin-friendly or just transient environmental types. The greater risk, honestly, comes from hand-to-mouth transmission. If you touch a contaminated surface and then touch your face, food, or say a wound, you might transfer microbes that way. Some groups, like the very young, the elderly, and folks who are immunocompromised, can actually be more susceptible to opportunistic pathogens that might be present. So, not all microbes are harmful. Actually, many are harmless or even protective. The presence of these benign microbes can crowd out potential pathogens. The toilet seat microbiota is just another example of how microbes colonize every possible niche. Studying these communities really helps scientists understand microbial ecology and, how surfaces can shape microbial evolution. In microbial communities, genes, including those for antibiotic resistance, can move between bacteria through a process called horizontal gene transfer, or HGT. It's not like individuals catching a resistance gene the way you catch a cold. Instead, bacteria are exchanging DNA in ways that over time can spread resistance. That's why we have to be cautious about overusing antibiotics and harsh disinfectants, since they could select for resistant strains. Let's do a bit of myth busting. Myth: toilet seats are the main source of household infections. That's actually false. Kitchen sponges, cutting boards, and hands usually carry more risk because they come into contact with food and mouths. Here's another one. Myth: if it's on the seat, it will definitely infect me. Also false. Infection requires exposure to a pathogenic strain and often some vulnerability in the host. Cleaning has evolved beyond bleach and soap. New research and commercial products explore the idea of probiotic cleaners, surfaces seeded with benign bacteria that outcompete pathogens. The principle is ecological. Fill the niche with friendly microbes so harmful ones can't gain a foothold. Some cleaners deposit non-pathogenic bacillus strains that persist on surfaces and reduce pathogen count. Other smart strategies include targeted disinfection, where you clean high-touch areas like flush handles, door handles, and faucets, rather than obsessively disinfecting everything. Ventilation is also key. Reducing aerosol persistence with good airflow is crucial. A simple practice like lid-down flushing can help reduce aerosol spread. And when it comes to material choice, antimicrobial materials like copper alloys can lower survival times for microbes, though they're not a silver bullet. Alright, let's talk about some practical takeaways, things you can actually do today. Here are some simple, science-backed tips you can start using right away. First, remember to close the lid before flushing. This small step really helps reduce aerosol spread in your bathroom. Second, make sure you wash your hands thoroughly after using the bathroom. Honestly, this is your #1 defense. Hand washing removes microbes you might otherwise transfer, so it's super important. So it's important to clean high-touch spots regularly, like flush handles, doorknobs, and faucet handles. You should use an EPA-registered disinfectant or a diluted bleach solution if that's appropriate. And, it's best not to keep toothbrushes or food near the toilet because aerosols can settle on nearby items. Good ventilation is key. Just open a window or use an exhaust fan to help decrease humidity and airborne particles. So, it's important to avoid the overuse of harsh disinfectants in non-healthcare settings. You really want to aim for balance here. Overcleaning with aggressive chemicals, well, that can actually disrupt beneficial communities and even potentially select for resistant strain. You might want to consider probiotic cleaners if you're looking for a maintenance solution that, really focuses on microbial balance. Our micro future. This all kind of shows us what these ideas tell us about the bigger picture. The toilet seat microbiome is actually a microcosm of broader science. It really shows us how microbes shape environments, and how our daily choices in turn shape these microbial worlds. With advances in microbiome research, we're learning that microbes aren't just threats. They're actually partners in health, ecology, and technology. So, looking ahead, there are some really interesting possibilities. For instance, surface engineering. Imagine materials that can actually resist harmful pathogens, but without hurting the good microbes. Then there's microbial forensics, which means using the unique microbial signatures left on surfaces to trace usage patterns or even track down outbreaks. And, we might even see probiotic public spaces in the future, like bathrooms and shared areas that are designed to encourage protective microbes. This tiny ecosystem is honestly a reminder that, life finds a way everywhere. And the more we learn about it, the smarter our choices can be. So next time you glance at a toilet seat, try not to just see gross. Instead, see a living, adaptive community. Respect it, clean sensibly, and of course, always wash your hands. The invisible world is always at work, and understanding it makes us safer and, honestly, more curious citizens of a microbial planet. Your one like, share, and subscribe will really help us create more valuable content. Quiz for viewers. What is the most important way to prevent microbial spread from a toilet? Comment below.